Sabrina 70s comic, issue 72. Sabrina thinks that last-minute shopping gets hectic, and the writer thinks to have her consider using a genie to help her out, which witches would do a lot more. But she thinks that would take the fun out of Christmas. I guess she has to mean because she wouldn't be the one doing the shopping. She doesn't reference the last time she had a genie do that, where she didn't think it would take the fun out of it. She sees a package fall away from a woman carrying a bunch of presents, and warns her about the package as she walks away. Is something bad gonna happen to her for trying to help her? She somehow doesn't know which way the woman who was right in front of her went. She borrows a broom that was on sale. Would she be caught flying away with it on a security camera? I guess anyone seeing her would assume they were hallucinating, except they could rewind it and see it again as much as they wanted. I guess a spy witch will get rid of the footage. She flies over to the woman and puts her package back with her, and she returns the broom with no consequences. Good! It's always annoying to see the main characters be prosecuted for something and threatens to wreck the enjoyment of the story. It's one time where realism really isn't worth it. Sabrina sees someone taking a really lame Christmas tree because it's all he can afford for $10, and he says he doesn't want to disappoint his family, when obviously that would disappoint him. Sabrina casts a spell to make the tree a real Christmas tree. You'd think he'd notice right away, considering the extra weight. Maybe part of her spell was preventing him from questioning it, since she didn't consider that he would. After Sabrina points out that she's running out of time, she has every reason to save a snowboarding kid from a truck. It turns out the department store is closed. Sabrina idiotically doesn't brainwash him into changing his mind. She shouldn't be punished for doing good things. What kind of writing is that? Somehow, because most witches use genies for shopping, the genie she summoned says that these are the only presents he has left. Bullshit! Do you know how many things there are to buy in the world? Let alone the entire universe. And I guess the genie doesn't have the creativity to think of good presents himself to zap up. Neither does Sabrina, who you'd think would have a list and give it to him. She had a list last time she went Christmas shopping. Why did she zap the things up herself? So Hilda and Zelda humor her when they get a pillow and clock radio. Fortunately, when Sabrina cries, somehow thinking she doesn't have the spirit of Christmas, her stereotypical witch parent figures somehow know what happened to her today and are proud of her. So have they finally accepted her for who she is? What took so long? What changed? I guess they were watching her with Hilda's crystal ball. It makes some sense that Hilda's happy with her because she has a soft spot for children, and she's used to humoring her, as she and Zelda put their hands on her shoulders. This is a good, heartwarming Christmas story. It'd be a terrible excuse for a comic if her aunts were abusive and didn't love her. There's supposed to be subversions, and people would expect that witches would make terrible aunts. The kind of people who would turn themselves into monsters and send her away from them. In the next story, we see Zelda without her hat for once, and she definitely looks better without it. Hilda's in a good enough mood to say good morning, and Zelda tells Sabrina that's some nice needlepoint she did. So Sabrina thanks her. Surprisingly, Zelda doesn't know how to do it. I expect her to be an expert, and she's been alive for hundreds of years, so she had plenty of time to learn how to do it. Hilda, having no social skills and being very easily irritated, wants acknowledgement for the fact that she said good morning. I mean, it was rare for her, but still, that's so minor. Sabrina and Hilda keep talking, somehow ignoring Hilda after she clearly wanted attention, when Hilda's known for her temper and magic abuse. So she sure is a great aunt that she doesn't try to punish either of them for it. She asks if she's invisible because they didn't notice her. Even Ambrose ignores her when she says hi, which seems uncharacteristic of him. Maybe it makes sense for his practical joker personality. Maybe he's punishing her for acting horribly recently. But it'd have to be an off-screen thing. And since when do these witches punish anyone by merely giving them the silent treatment? Ambrose asks Sabrina for help on a crossword puzzle. He ignores Hilda's correct answer, and Sabrina considers it and gives him the same one. Is it going to be explained what's going on? Is Della responsible? Ambrose thanks Sabrina, and Hilda's confused because she can see herself in the mirror, as she was smart enough to check. Sabrina asks Ambrose if he'd like some cookies, and she asks for some fudge as he asks for some tea. Considering how nice Hilda's been recently, even one measly story ago, it's very satisfying to see Hilda saying, "Hey, you jerks, I'm not a piece of furniture. I want to be noticed." Wow, I thought she'd abuse her powers against them, like create a small earthquake. but instead she makes herself look really fat and somehow thinks it'll work when she's not directly in front of them. I'm so confused. I really hope there's an explanation for what's going on. She gives herself multiple heads, undoes it as Zelda says they're delicious, and she floats as Ambrose asks for more tea. I can definitely sympathize with her here on being left out. Her family asks where she is, which I'm surprised by at this point. They could be just messing with her, but that's out of character. They're such good actors, and they act sincerely confused when she gets fed up and throws a temper tantrum. Why did this get their attention? And Ambrose says she was childish and says to pretend they didn't see that, and Zelda agrees to just ignore her. This story pissed me off. You're not supposed to have an ending like that. They should be thankful that's all she did. I really thought she'd send an earthquake to send all of them upwards. They should be grateful all she did was scream and hit the walls. This wasn't funny. It was sad and infuriating. We needed to be told why the fuck they were ignoring her in the first place. Right from the start of the story. Then it would have seemed like karma. In the next story, Hilda says the temperature is below 0. Somehow, Ambrose says that the colder it gets, the more human activity slows down, including their magical powers. What the fuck? How does that make sense? Hilda says that when it gets below 0, witches have just enough magic for only one spell a day. That's bullshit. And I bet it got contradicted in the comic before. Am I expected to assume that every time there was a story in the winter, it wasn't below 0? There needs to be a proper explanation for this, like Della didn't. This would only be the case as a curse from a whole bunch of witches, but wouldn't it have been undone, like every other curse could be? Is a part of the curse brainwashing every witch into thinking it's always been in effect? That's dark. The story could have been interesting, but it needed a proper explanation for me to take it seriously. Instead, I'm angry right from the start. How did these witches get out of the North Pole? I assume every time they went to the North Pole, they brought some heat with them. Ambrose casts a spell to keep himself warm as toast. Then he falls down the hill and he skis into a tree. This is frustrating. Anyone would want to cast a spell to keep warm in the winter. Why does he have to be punished for that? Characters should be punished for good reasons, because they're jerks. Sabrina used her magic to make herself irresistible to a ski instructor she finds handsome, hoping that he'll be able to teach her how to ski, even though her love spells always result in the person being solely focused on being infatuated with her. So he clearly wouldn't have the presence of mind to teach her anything. Not to mention this is cheating on Harvey, but I can't blame her at this point. He's an idiot who cheats on her too. He then skis into a ravine, and Hilda feels sorry for her. But like you'd expect from Hilda, she doesn't use her magic on undoing Sabrina's mistake, which Sabrina should do tomorrow, and instead decides to use her magic to be selfish. She tells her skis to make her accident-proof, sparing her from every type of goof. It's entertaining to see her do a full somersault. Hilda splashes them with snow, as I promptly wish that this was the story that preceded the previous one. At least then they'd be more justified in ignoring her, because she could have been called out on not using her last spell to heal that guy. She heads for their bus and slips and gets hit by it, and Zelda asks why she didn't use her magic to make her skis accident-proof. I thought it wasn't her skis, but the fact that she tripped and fell. I was suspicious when she cast that spell because it was too good to be true. So she ends up injured in the ending, which is supposed to be a punishment for mocking them all for wasting their last spell, when it wasn't their fault they couldn't see the future. And this is a really overly extreme punishment. She's done a lot worse things than this. It should have been thrown back at her that she should have used her magic to undo Sabrina's mistake instead of everyone forgetting about it. In the next story, Sabrina is surprised to see Hilda at one of her basketball games. Huh, they're actually using the concept of her being a basketball player again. Sabrina's gotten morals all of a sudden. She tells Hilda that she wants no help from her because she wants to win or lose on her own. The last time she was a basketball player, she cast a spell so that she'd dunk whatever she laid her hands on. I guess she learned her lesson. Hilda doesn't get the hint and says to Salem that magic never hurt anyone. Yeah, right. She should know better by now. She overdoes her boost and sends Sabrina into the ropes over her head, and she needs to be rescued by a ladder as she's embarrassed. Is this about giving Sabrina karma for all the time she humiliated Harvey doing what Hilda's doing? I wish those stories were referenced then. By which, Hilda somehow didn't get the hint to stop with the magic after the first time, because she still thinks she's in the right for helping her, even though she was told not to, which shouldn't have been in the story then. The coach says that Sabrina needs a screen when she takes her shot. Naturally, Hilda doesn't know what that means. But instead of having a brain and doing nothing, she summons a window and movie screen around her. And the asshole referee calls a foul against the home team, instead of everyone just questioning how these things magically appeared in front of them. I guess they were all forced to forget this. Luckily, Salem happened to go up to Sabrina, so Sabrina tells him to inconvenience Hilda next time. I wish it was explained that Salem went up to her because he was worried about her. I guess he was. Why did Sabrina start whispering? She should have been whispering the whole time. And I don't think I've seen her humiliated nearly enough considering how much she's humiliated Harvey in his sports. Salem puts Hilda's hat over her head with his magical tail and she falls over. At least she apologizes to the guy she falls on. Then she gets squirted with water from the water fountain. Finally, she starts to notice that every time she gets set to do some zapping, something happens. Good thing Salem was able to read her mind so he knew to zap the popcorn machine and send it all over her, because she wasn't talking that time. Sabrina tells Hilda that her team won by a large margin. So much for karma. And Hilda's confused when Salem's called the big star of the game instead of figuring it out immediately. The first story is about Sabrina doing tons of good deeds for people while Christmas shopping. And somehow she's punished for it because the store is closed and the genie can only give her crappy gifts somehow. You'd think Sabrina would have a list and just ask for what's on it and be able to zap it up if she has to. Good thing her aunts humor her in the ending. The second story is infuriating because it's about Hilda being ignored by her family for no reason. And she's treated like the bad guy when she gets fed up instead of them apologizing. We should have been told why they were doing this from the start. Then it'd be karma. The third story is about the bullshit that witches suddenly can't use their magic more than once a day in temperatures below zero. And they all waste their spells. And Hilda gets hit by a bus when she clearly cast a spell to become immune to accidents. And she doesn't undo Sabrina getting someone hurt. That was pretty dark. It was interesting that they can't use their magic a lot in the cold, but it's contradictory. The final story has Sabrina get humiliated in sports for a change, but not nearly enough considering all the time she did that to Harvey, and his team lost in some of those cases. Here, Salem makes sure she wins because he stops Hilda most of the time. I understand why the writer would prefer Sabrina over Harvey, but you'd think Hilda would have respected Sabrina's wish and not interfered. Especially when she heard jargon she didn't understand.